On this week's episode of Whether or Not, we have nature and news stories on Pennsylvania energy and walruses. Jake has your chilly Penn State homecoming weekend forecast, and Andy's got a feature featuring a Whether or Not alumnus and how he's helping people in Florida deal with the effects of Hurricane Irma. All of that and more coming right up. Whether or Not starts right now. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Whether or Not. I'm your host, Colby McCabe.
And I'm your forecaster, Jake Langedyk.
Well, Jake, we already saw our first flakes of the season here in State College earlier this week. Will it remain cold for this weekend for the homecoming?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it will be. For those going to the parade on Friday night, we really want to bundle up. Temperatures are going to be in the teens, possibly 20s. For Saturday, not much better for the football game, too. Temperatures in the 30s all weekend long. It'll be a little bit before you see a slight warm-up in the forecast picture.
Okay, well, I'll certainly be sure to bring several layers when I go tailgating early
That's
Saturday
right.
morning.
Oh, yes.
Well, let's go on to nature in the news.
You may be surprised to learn that Pennsylvania is among just a small number of states in the Union to guarantee clean air and water as a basic civil right. Indeed, Article 1, Section 27 of the Pennsylvania State Constitution says, quote, "The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment." Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people, end quote. The amendment was added back in 1971, but it's only today that it's now being enforced. John Dernbeck, director of the Environmental Law and Sustainability Center at Widener University in Chester County, said that back in June, the state Supreme Court used Article 1, Section 27 against oil and natural gas companies who wanted to lease out state-owned land for shale gas exploration. Companies would have had to pay the Commonwealth to frack and drill these lands, and that money would have been used to balance the state budget.
The state of New Jersey has taken action in the name of reducing contaminants known as perfluorinated compounds in their drinking water. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection announced on November 1st that it has implemented a recommendation from state water quality experts to set a legal limit for a perfluorinated compound known as PFOA to 14 parts per trillion. This is in addition to another proposal back in August that aimed to limit the concentration of PFNA, another perfluorinated compound used in plastics manufacturing locations, to 13 parts per trillion. By introducing these regulations, New Jersey would become the first state to require utilities to test for two compounds and remove them from drinking water. These regulations would apply to around 582 water utilities and 738 schools, churches, hospitals, and factories in the state that operate their own drinking water systems. The introduction of these regulations by New Jersey would have inspired several other states to at least consider developing their own regulations on the contamination of drinking water, including Pennsylvania, which has recently accepted a petition to investigate whether or not they should set standards for their own drinking water contamination levels.
Conservation groups are warning that Pacific walruses are being handed a death sentence after the Trump administration declined to list them as an endangered species. Chad Jay, the lead researcher at the U.S. Geological Survey's Alaska Science Center, says that melting sea ice is forcing walruses to relocate, but they need that sea ice for breeding, feeding, and nursing. Sea ice also provides a refuge to protect them from predators, such as sharks. Walrus conservation efforts began as early as 2008, but attempts to list the walrus as endangered did not come to fruition under the Bush and Obama administrations. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service acknowledged that the sea ice is shrinking, but says that walruses should be able to easily adapt to their new environment. Though the number of walruses in the wild is uncertain, the International Union for Conservation of Natural and Nature Resources lists them as a species of least concern.
The Pennsylvania Technical Assistance Program, or PennTAP, has received over $650,000 in grants from the Environmental Protection Agency and the State Department of Environmental Protection in order to provide energy and environmental assessments to businesses across Pennsylvania. According to PennTAP, over $150,000 of the grant money will be used to assist food manufacturers in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and hazardous waste, in addition to attempting to improve efficiency in the use of raw materials, energy, and water while conserving natural resources. The bulk and technical assistance to small and mid-sized manufacturers. while the rest of it will be used to provide students of Penn State's College of Engineering with training and work experiences in businesses that use PennTap services. Most importantly, the grant allows PennTap to continue to provide free services to Pennsylvania businesses as opposed to paying for them themselves, which incentivizes these businesses to take a more in-depth look at how they are using resources and how to use them more efficiently in an effort to reduce their carbon footprint on the environment.
Well, friends, it's pretty safe to say at this point that winter is finally on its way. First, we had the snowfall come on Tuesday, and now we have some cold air coming in time for the weekend. Weather picture looks a little something like this. Cold air coming down from Canada will work its way down to the Pennsylvania. It's going to cool things down by about 10, 20, even by as much as 25 degrees for Friday and into Saturday. As you can see, Saturday, things don't look too much different. We do have a weak low pressure system off to our west, but that's not going to do a whole lot to warm things up in our neck of the woods. Sunday, though, a little bit of a different story. Another low pressure system off to our west will work its way across the day Sunday. We could see some rain showers, possibly even some more snowflakes in time for Sunday night and into the early part of Monday morning. For Friday, though, mostly clear skies with maybe a touch or two of sunshine, 32 degrees for your daytime high, so not going to feel all that warm. If you're going to the homecoming parade Friday night, do bundle up. It is going to feel quite cold, especially with a lack of cloud cover. 17 degrees for your overnight low Friday. Saturday, though, it's going to warm up by a little bit, but not too much. 35 degrees for your daytime high with a mostly sunny sky. If you're going to the homecoming game on Saturday, do bundle up. If you're going to those early tailgates and even into kickoff. 32 degrees for kickoff temperature at 12 noon. It's going to be a quite cold game indeed, but let's hope we can get that victory against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Finally, for Sunday, 42 degrees for your daytime high with a chance of showers coming in during the nighttime hours that could change over into snow during the night on Monday. And now for this week's feature, we turn things over now to Andy Moffiitt, who has a look at a Penn State alum's research into Hurricane Irma.
Hurricane Irma caused an estimated $64 billion in damage and killed over 130 people throughout its path of destruction, with the majority of the damage and deaths occurring in Florida. So what goes on behind the scenes to keep residents safe as a storm like this looms on the horizon? Michael Spagnuolo, the Deputy State Meteorologist for the Florida Division of Emergency Management, tells us more about how state meteorologists prepare officials for hazardous weather.
FDEM here in Florida has a team of 3 meteorologists. We're all degreed full-time meteorologists, and we work all year round in the State Emergency Operations Center here in Tallahassee, Florida. And our responsibility is to make sure that all of CERT, or the State Emergency Response Team here in Tallahassee, is constantly aware 24/7, 365 of any potential weather hazards that are impacting the state.
But it isn't just the state of Florida that Spagnuolo has to pay attention to. The team also closely monitors other major storms, such as Hurricane Harvey as it affected Texas.
So for Hurricane Harvey, we did plenty of just awareness reports for everyone in the CERT team and FDEM, because Harvey was one of the first storms where these new things were going to be implemented. For instance, it was the first time storm surge warnings and watches were being issued operationally, so those are going to be going out on WIA for the first time, and we were monitoring that to see what kind of issues we're going to have. Were there going to be call influxes to 911 centers, extreme wind warnings? So there was many new products coming out from National Weather Service, and it was the first big storm to make landfall in a while. So there was a lot for Florida to watch and learn from that.
When they aren't monitoring a current event, Spagnuolo and his team are preparing for the next major storm, just as they had been for Irma.
The real answer to that is when we started preparing for Irma. Well, that was forever. June 1st, we started preparing for Irma. We started preparing for Irma at the start of last hurricane season. They're always preparing for that kind of stuff. But as far as when things really got going, my typical shift work is from Sunday to Wednesdays. Those are my responsibility. So when I came in Sunday morning, that was when things had really gone a westward shift in track.
Not long before Irma made landfall was when Spagnuolo was the busiest, working rotating shifts for days on end.
the operations center was working on 24/7 operations starting that Tuesday, so basically that week before landfall. So we have Alpha team and Bravo team, and you were 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And essentially we were working that staff. We pulled in staff from the National Weather Service as well to help us, and from the Florida Air National Guard.
During these rotating shifts, the meteorology team had many tasks.
Spending a lot of time doing conference calls with our different emergency support functions. So, DOT needed a call, environmental protection needed a call, health, shelters, the Red Cross, they all wanted briefings and calls, and then answering a lot of questions. We were preparing for a lot of worst case scenarios involving, full evacuations of the Keys and Lake Okeechobee issues. So just having conference calls with different groups on those and making sure that everyone's aware of those, giving briefings. A lot of the time comes down to briefings.
After it appeared the hurricane would have a direct impact on the state of Florida, Spagnuolo and his team didn't get a break for quite some time.
With our 12-hour shifts and then having briefings in the morning early for the governor before he would get on the road to do his tour to try and get people to evacuate throughout parts of the southern peninsula, that'd be about 5 or 6 in the morning, and then we'd have our evening shift evening briefings about 6 in the evening, and with that shift change you'd have lots of extra questions. So usually you ended up doing about a 13 or 14-hour workday. And in that week before Irma, from when it made landfall, even though I was working a couple days before that, just in that week in our busiest time frame, I worked about 100 hours. I think it was like 102 and a half hours.
So the next time you hear of a major storm impacting Florida, rest assured Spagnuolo and his fellow meteorologists are working hard to keep officials informed and to help them make the best decisions to keep you safe. Make sure to always heed advice from local, state, and federal officials during dangerous storms, and most importantly, always stay safe. For Weather or Not, I'm Andy Moffitt.
Winter Wonderland, it will not be this weekend, but the good news is for next week, it is going to be drier and just a touch warmer. First things first, weekend recap. Pretty cold for Friday and Saturday. Temperatures not even getting out of the 30s for the daytime highs. Overnight lows Friday dropping down into the teens. So bundle up Friday night and Saturday night as well. For Sunday, though, we warm up a little bit, but we do invite that chance of rain and snow into the mix. But Futurecast shows for the week ahead, pretty dry for the coming days. Cloudy skies for Monday through Wednesday. We do invite some more sun in the picture as we end the week, but you'll notice temperatures hovering just a few degrees either side of average. We start off a little below for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but for Thursday, we warm up a little bit, but drop right back down for Friday. Just the kind of weather we need for the last week before the Thanksgiving break.
Well, thank you for that forecast, Jake. It looks like we'll be approaching what we would normally expect temperature-wise here in State College in mid-November.
Oh, yes, perfect weather to celebrate Thanksgiving coming up in just 2 weeks' time, am I right?
I can't believe it. It seems like time's just flying by. But it's good because we'll finally get a break from class.
Oh, yes. The only comfort I can offer you for this week's forecast is that it's going to be plenty warm enough so we won't see any more snow on the ground.
Okay, so we won't add that November snow total to the trace we had
yes.
earlier in the week. But earlier on in the show, we actually asked you, what is the average snowfall for the month of November in State College? Is it A, 1.1 inches, B, 1.9 inches, C, 2.3 inches, or D, 3.1 inches? If you guess C, you are correct. As we transition into the late fall, snow becomes more common. The record snowfall in November since 1900 was 23.4 inches, set back in 1995.
Oh boy, the weather's not going to be that frightful. It's going to be a pretty dry pattern for next week, but our next chance of snow, we might have to go far out in the future for that.
Well, that's good to hear. We don't want to mess up any Thanksgiving plans coming up.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this week's episode of Whether or Not. I'm your host, Colby McCabe.
And I'm your forecaster, Jake Langedyk.
Have a great weekend, everybody.